Hello everyone, this is Manoj and once again welcome back to the React.js series. In this session, we will learn about conditional rendering in React.js. In React.js projects, you have to show and hide certain things based on some conditions, and fortunately in React.js we can do the same using conditional rendering. So let's take an example and see the different type of conditional rendering. So let's create a component in the components folder. So new file, I'm giving this name as conditional rendering.js. Let's create a functional component. So import React from React, const conditional rendering, return simple div. Oops. Welcome back, Manoj. And finally, export default conditional rendering. Save. So this is our traditional functional component. So let's try to use the first rendering, which is if else. So here, first of all, let's create a state. So const logged in and set logged in, and I'm going to use state hook, and on the initial level I'm going to set this as false. So here in the curly braces we can use our if statement. So if logged in is equal true, then simply return a div. You are a valid user. Let's copy this, and on the else part you are an invalid user. And let's comment out this, control KC, or let me delete this. Now go back to app.js. Let's import our component. So import conditional rendering from component conditional rendering. Comment this out and simply use our component. Let's save. Now go back to browser. So you are an invalid user, and the reason is our initial state is false. So the control will print this statement. All right, let's change it to true, save, go back to browser. So you are a valid user. All right, so this is how we can use our if else rendering. So that is the first approach. Now let's try the second approach, which is a little better than this, using a variable. So here, let me comment this out. So simply let message. So this is a variable, and now if logged in is equal true, then, and if there is only single return statement, then we don't need to use these. We need to set this message. So message is equal to, now we can put this complete div over here, and for the else part, let's copy the else message, which is you are an invalid user. And finally, return a div, and inside div use curly braces for the JSX and use your message variable Actually, we don't need these single quotes. Save, go back to browser. So you are a valid user. And if I change our state as false, then it will say you are an invalid user. All right. So this is our second approach. Now let's consider the third approach, which is even more easier than this variable approach. So let's consider the third approach, which is even more easier than this variable approach, and that is ternary conditional operator. Go back to VS Code. Let me comment this also. So now here in the curly braces, simply use return. If logged in is true, then we will return dev you are a valid user, else colon, not the question mark, you are an invalid user. Save. You can see this is pretty much easier and clean approach. If you consider these two approaches, we are doing the same thing but in a very neat and clean manner. All right, now let's go back to browser and see the result. See, you are an invalid user, and let's change the state as true, and hopefully we'll see you are a valid user. Perfect, you are a valid user. So you see, this is the most common used approach in React.js project. I personally use this approach over this variable and this if else rendering. All right, now let me comment this out, and let's try to take an example for the fourth approach, which is short circuit approach. And this approach uses left and right side evaluation. All right. And this approach you will use when you try to load some data from your API, and your API is taking some time to give the response. And for the meantime, you want to display some UI or some message to the end user. All right. So here return if logged in, and simply you are a valid user. So first this will evaluate this variable and it will check whether it is true or false. Then it will also check this one. So in that case there is no else part. If that is true, then this will get printed, otherwise nothing will get print on the browser. All right, let's save this and go back to browser and see you are a valid user. And if I change this to false, nothing is printed on the document. All right, let me again change it to true. So actually I was telling, let's say you are doing some operation and you are fetching some data from your API, and that is taking time. So meanwhile, let's say if you want to display a message like loading, so this is you can print, and I personally use this method. So it will give you a sensible message to the end user, like something is happening at the background. All right. So these are some of the most used conditional rendering approaches, and I hope you are have the idea. So these are some of the most used conditional rendering approaches, and I hope now you have the idea how to use all of them, what we have discussed so far. Alright guys, in the next video we will learn about list rendering. So this is pretty much about this session. I will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Take care. Bye bye.